This video is about morphology. The definition of morphology in the Webster's Medical Dictionary is form and structure. Not form or structure, form and structure. Evolutionists attempt to try to get around the fact that if evolutionary change were to take place, it would relate to morphology, by putting forth all kinds of jargon about nylonase bacteria, which of course is not evidence of evolution, or about, immunities, things like this. They're really ridiculous. They do this because the fossil record of life does not convey that there has been morphological transition from one kind of living creature to another. A great many, dozens upon dozens upon dozens of the most prominent scientists, mostly evolutionist scientists, in this world have stated in their own books that the fossil record of life does not show clear evidence of transition, that species appear abruptly and without predecessors. Now, when you quote an evolutionist scientist about this, an evolutionist will scream, quote mining, which is a ridiculous, childish rant. If they think that's a quote mine, whatever that is, there's no such thing as a quote mine, but if they think quoting an evolutionist scientist somehow takes them out of context, well, then they should stop quoting their own scientists. Stop believing what they say. If you don't believe what they say, then stop complaining when somebody else quotes them, if you don't, because you're going to claim you don't believe what they say. It's ridiculous. However, they have made those statements. The preponderance of them who have written books make that very statement. You see, evolution contends that from a single cell, from molecules, yes, and they claim abiogenesis is not evolution either, it is, from molecules evolved into a single-celled organism, and that single-celled organism evolved into the plethora of body plans, order, kingdom, phylum, genus, species of creatures that live in this world. That requires morphological change. Trillions upon trillions of morphological changes. To go from a bacteria to a human being within the evolution concept would require trillions upon trillions upon trillions upon trillions upon trillions of morphological changes. Trillions. And yet the fossils do not convey any morphological change. Now, when evolutionists look at, when they present what they claim are transitional forms, oftentimes they make the most absurd thing. They show an animal of one morphology and another of a completely different morphology and say, look, that one came from that one over time. It's insanity. It's ridiculous. Evolutionists attempt to argue around the fact that if evolution were true, it would be represented by morphological change. Because if you take one organism and you take another and claim this one has evolved and begat that one, but they look identical, how is any can it be said evolution has changed, has taken place? Of course, we know that dog varieties, species, breeds of dog don't represent evolution either. Of course, those were created by man, but they all have the same morphology. Dog. Every dog has the same set of morphological features every other dog has. There is not one dog that has a morphological feature that all dogs do not have. Form and structure, not form or structure, form and structure. Or morphology. Now, this is how evolutionists work to get around that. I debated Dr. Mark A. McPeak, who's a biologist, professor of biology at a university. And he said this in our debate. One of his responses to me was, the emphasis on morphology. Now, listen carefully to what he says, because not only is he going to try to weasel around the fact that if evolution had taken place, it would be represented by morphological change, but he's going to make a lie here, too. He's going to state that there has been morphological change, and when he was asked to provide it, he refused. The emphasis on morphology is also decidedly misplaced because all aspects of morphology, physiology, and behavior are critical to the success of an organism in its environment. For example, I work on damselfly species that live with different predators. One group of species lives only with large dragonflies as top predators, while another group of species live only in lakes with fish. Excuse me. The species that live with dragonflies avoid dragonfly predators by swimming away from them as they attack. In contrast, the ones that live with fish avoid fish predation by being very inactive and trying not to be seen. These two groups differ in morphology, physiology, and behavior. For example, the critical, and that he says he just said they differ in morphology, physiology, and behavior. And now he says, for example, now he's going to provide an evidence of how an example of how they differ in morphology, physiology, and behavior. For example, the critical feature of the ones that live with dragonflies are that they swim away from the attacking predator. The propensity to swim when attacked is a behavior. Sure enough. If an individual does not swim away from an attacking predator, then the success of that strategy will depend on how much thrust its morphological features can generate in the water to propel it, how much muscle it has to generate that thrust, the biochemistry of the muscles to feed ATP to the muscles to keep them working during the strenuous exertion, like swimming away from a predator. All of this morphology, physiology, and behavior must work in concert to produce successful response to a dragonfly predator. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? But you know what? I asked him 3 times. Immediately after, he asked me, what is the morphological difference between the, not assuming that there is none, I wanted to know what it was, okay? Because I wanted to say, to demonstrate that what you're observing is simply 2 different varieties of the same creature, you're not providing evidence that one evolved a different morphology than from the other. First of all, it doesn't have any new morphological structures. Okay, more muscle is not a new morphological feature. It's the same morphological feature, the same muscles. It's not a new muscle. A new muscle would be a new morphological feature. So I asked him 3 times to provide me what is the evidence? What is the actual morphological difference between those 2 dragonflies? He refused to answer that question 3 times. He would not. Because there is none. So he's lied. If there were a morphological difference, that still would not be evidence that one came from the other. It would be simply 2 varieties of the same organism. That's not proof that one came from the other. Secondly, he refused to cite the morphological difference because there was none. Otherwise, he would have. But he did not, because he could not, because there is not. So what he has done here is morphology, physiology, and behavior, for example, and then not provided the evidence of this morphological difference. Like I say, if a morphological difference existed, that would be fine. That would not be evidence that one came from the other. Even so, he stated there was a morphological difference and refused to tell me what it was when asked 3 times. And then, of course, in his response, in what he said here, he says, quote, how much muscle it has to generate that thrust, the biochemistry of that muscle, blah, blah. That's not evidence of morphological difference. This man is a PhD in biology, and he's telling me that how much muscle an organism has in a particular muscle is a morphological difference? No, it's not. It's the same morphological feature, just more of it. That's not a morphological difference. Morphology is structure and form and structure. There's no structural difference if one dragonfly has the same set of muscles in the same locations. One of them has more of that muscle than the other. That's not evolutionary change. Consider, if that dragonfly continued to grow more and more and more of that same muscle, or more and more of any of its features or all of its features, would it become a different kind of creature? No. It would still have the same morphology. It would just be one ugly-looking dragonfly. Evolutionists are liars.